Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking the time for tuning in for another one of our conversations with our health and safety peers. I'm joined today by a colleague called Joe Ryan. If you're a sports fan, Joe's CV is envious, actually. Some of the things he's seen, some of the things he's been involved in. I certainly enjoy my sports, and many of you do. And actually, the diversity of the sports that Joe's been involved in from a she perspective, I think has pretty much got something for everybody in there. And he's about to take up a new role as head of health and safety for the Commonwealth Games that are due to be held in Birmingham. And that will start once we get through this COVID crisis. Joe, I think it'd be great if you sort of put a bit more meat on the bones in terms of your CV, really, and certainly the story you told me last time we spoke around how you actually first started to be drawn into the sphere of health and safety.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, and thanks for inviting me on today's session. My career in health and safety really I would say, started way back in the late 80s, early 90s. As you mentioned, when I was in the Royal Navy. I didn't know it at the time, but obviously the Armed Forces gave myself so much structure to my life. I'd left school and I was looking for a bit of a career path, and followed my father's sort of pathway, really going into the forces, and enjoyed my time in the Navy. One of my roles within the Navy happened to be what we call swimmer of the watch. So I used to be the person, whether you call me smart or a bit of a fool, jumping off the side of the ship. I used to be dolled up with a dry suit and what we call a bear suit underneath. I'd be going into waters that'd be icy cold up in the Arctic Circle, and you'd have to pull out somebody who might have fallen over the side of the ship. Mm-hmm. So when I came to leaving the Navy, I was thinking about, right, what am I going to do? My work within the Navy was hydrographic and oceanographic surveying. So we were charting new waters and creating the Admiralty charts that would go out to all the ships around the world. So I was thinking, right, okay, I'll go into surveying here in the UK, but came out, unfortunately, during the recession, and there wasn't the work. Took a few odd jobs here and there, and one evening, just went down to my local swimming pool, and I was swimming up and down. My father-in-law was there with me, and he knew this guy that was stood on the side. And he said, who's this fella that's swimming up and down all the time? And I got introduced to him, and he invited me then to join his lifesaving club. And I really enjoyed it. I love swimming, I love sport. Next thing I know, I was taking a lifesaving course. That just happened to open up an opportunity at another local swimming pool where I qualified to be a lifeguard and got my first probably sort of part-time job in the sport and leisure industry, lifeguarding a local leisure centre. But as time progressed, I progressed through the ranks in the centre there, and I went full-time, became a duty manager, and then eventually, 9-10 years later, I ended up working in Northamptonshire as a centre manager, running my own swimming pool. In 2000, the business I was working for merged with another large leisure operator in the UK, and these guys were contractors running public authority, local authority leisure centres, about 120 leisure centres across the UK, and 4 of those were the national sports centres. The 2 businesses joined, and they formed a whole load of new roles, and one of them was a group health and safety manager role, which they'd never had before. I hadn't thought about applying for it, and colleagues of mine said, look, Joe, this is a job for you. This is right up your street. It's very much operational, it's structured, this is you. So on the closing day, I decided, okay, I'll apply. So I put my CV in, I went for an interview, and happened then to get the job. Part of the job there was to write a health and safety manual for the new company. Never written one before, so I set on a task with this, and I had a wonderful mentor and a guy called Keith Sage, who was in the end was the High Sheriff of Warwickshire, a magistrate, somebody I always looked up to, and for many years then he became my mentor, taking me through the sort of health and safety path. But anyway, at this point, he helped me with this management system. I wrote it, he had a look at it, proofread it, vetted it, and came back to me with comments. We eventually signed off the management system, put it out into this business, and got a lot of credibility, and a lot of people bought into it and thought, wow, this is incredible. And that really got me going on the health and safety path. And 4 years further on, we could see an opportunity, myself and my boss at the time, to actually turn our department to be income generating, because we were being approached by businesses outside the company I was working for to say, look, we could really do with some support. Can you help us?
Yeah.
But we weren't in a position to. So we approached our board of directors and with a bit of a business plan and said, look, we can provide a service outside, make the department income generating, so we contribute towards the bottom line, while still servicing the business internally, making sure that everybody gets the right support. Surprisingly, they weren't interested. And we were quite disappointed about that and surprised, because we thought we had a great plan, great idea. So we went away and thought about it, and in the end decided to say, look, there's an opportunity here. And myself and my boss at the time resigned from the business and set up our own business. Went for it really. And at that point again, we had no security on it. We had to generate our own business from scratch. Had to pay the mortgage and all of our bills. We had a little bit of work to keep us going, but we took the chance and set it up. And 2020, we're still here operating now, albeit I have demerged the business since then, but we're still operating now 16 years down the line.
You always had sort of an entrepreneurial spirit then. Is it, because sometimes we can be a bit risk averse as practitioners, obviously doing what you did.
I think the opportunity that we saw made us do that. There were some nerves about it, because we still had, obviously, like I say, mortgages to pay.
Yeah.
We understood there was a gap in the market in the industry, but also just felt confident about what we really feel we could do for the industry, and felt that there was an opportunity there to take. But I suppose I've got to be honest. I didn't look at it back and think, this is too big a risk to take. It was something that we felt we had to do, and possibly you look back and would say, well, if we hadn't have taken that, would we have regretted it now? And we probably would have done, yeah.
You wouldn't have known what experiences you could have had, I suppose, if you hadn't made that jump, because your career, the places you've been and the places you've worked, for any sports fan, the events that you've had the opportunity to be at, you were at the opening of the Olympics in London, and, those life experiences, aren't they, as much as anything else, as well as being part of something that delivered from a health and safety perspective, from a games perspective, from a spectacle, to be part of that and be intrinsic to that, is
absolutely. I mean, when you look back on what I've done over certainly since 2012, I've had life-changing experiences and experiences that will stay with me forever. And some of them are kind of once in a lifetime opportunities that, games will come around again, but I will not experience a London 2012 again in my lifetime. So to take that opportunity and be able to have that opportunity is a huge privilege. Go back to 2000 when I started out on the health and safety journey. I hadn't even thought about doing any of that kind of work at that point. We were still working in local authority leisure centres, and we continued to do that, right up probably till about 2010. So a good 6 years we were providing a service to the primarily the sport and leisure industry. I did get an insight into some events when I was offered safety officer role at Crystal Palace for the Norwich Union Grand Prix Athletics. And I went along, and it was the safety officer rather than the health and safety advisor. So at the time, I hadn't really understood what that role was. And I just thought it's doing what I was doing with the processes and making sure the venue's safe and so on, but never really understood the other side of it in terms of the crowd safety and the spectator safety, which, now I've got that experience, I fully understand that so much more. But looking back then, I was thinking, okay, I wasn't really appreciative of what that role was.
Looking at your qualification, obviously you're one of our alumni, you have our NGC as well as our diploma, but you also went on to do a diploma in spectator safety, because it is that completely different discipline, isn't it? I know there's overlaps. Yeah. It is a different discipline, and having all those different strings to your bow must be invaluable, actually.
Yeah, the level 4 spectator safety course, again, that was a deliberate choice to do that, because when I started out, and most people do start out at the national NEBOSH National General Certificate. I did that in 2000. Then I had this big gap before I went on and did the diploma. That was mostly because the advice I was given at the time by my mentor was, look, you don't really need this. You just need the operational experience. And for a long period of time, I listened to that and pushed away some challenges. There were people who said, look, you really should have the diploma, and you need to go up another level. And it was only really around about 2010, 2011 that I really seriously started thinking about that. And I look back on that and I think, wow, why did I not do that before? As hard as it was, a difficult, challenging qualification to get. I should have done it sooner, really, but I got there and I got the diploma, and that gave me what I felt was real credibility in the industry and enabled me also to look at the jobs and the opportunities that I've been able to deliver with that qualification. And without it, I wouldn't have been able to probably take those opportunities. But as I went through and got more involved with events after 2012, I realised that actually there's the health and safety advisor role and consultants role that works, and it happens on venues, and that's looking at the infrastructure, temporary structures, all the CDM side of things. But that role comes very close to the spectator safety side, and I was missing an element of competency there. So I've decided to put myself and my team through the level 4 spectator safety qualification, and that now has enabled us to operate as a safety officer as well, looking after crowds, such as Plymouth Albion Rugby Club. We're the resident safety officers down there on match days, as well as doing the other events that we do on the health and safety side. So I feel by having the general certificate, the NEBOSH diploma and the level 4, I've got a very, very much rounded package of skills that I can offer now the industry. What I look to do now is just try and specialise in various areas, whether it's NEBOSH fire, taking additional sort of CPD courses in CDM and things like that to really bolster what I already know and understand.
Yeah, well, of course, competency is absolutely key to what you do and how the level you perform at. But you're about to take on this other incredibly exciting role, actually, for a sports fan such as yourself, as well as a practitioner with the Commonwealth Games. When you start that role, you're going to obviously be looking at developing a health and safety strategy. What will you consider? How will you go about that from going from I know you've got this previous experience to draw on, but you are looking at a blank page almost when you go in there. So what will your first steps be when you start, post-COVID?
Yeah, it is very difficult, as you rightly point out. I have an idea in terms of the framework that I will use and how I'd approach it. But in all honesty, until you arrive, at the organising committee, we don't really know what it's going to look like and what the detail's going to be. But I have an idea of how I'd approach these elements, and certainly with the strategic plan, it's so important for me to really understand what the organising committee's values are and what their vision is, what they want to achieve. We all know with Birmingham that the delivery end will be to deliver successful Commonwealth Games in 2022. We know that. That's fact. What we don't know is what's behind that and what the legacy might be, whether that's the Athletes' Village being built and then that's going to be handed over as affordable housing, the redevelopment of the Alexander Stadium, and then how that's going to be used post-Games, and potentially are we going to employ local workforce from the West Midlands, and is there going to be an element of training, and then will we leave Birmingham 2022 once the Games are finished with a greater number of people within the West Midlands that are trained to a certain standard. What I need to do when I arrive is sit down with all the heads of function, sit down with the chief executive and the directors of venues and so on, and understand what their objectives are, what the vision is, and what their expectations are of me. Once I know that, then I can start piecing together the core strands of the strategic plan. The first thing I'll do there is set what our key objectives are going to be. And they'll probably only be about half a dozen in length, but I'll understand exactly what those objectives are. Then I can start building the detail of the strategy. And that'll take a fair while to do before I start launching into writing systems and training people and so on. It's that sort of methodology where don't dive in feet first. I'm not going there with any preconceived ideas. I'm going there with a very much an open mind. I know how the games work, but I need to take my time to listen and understand and then formulate what we think will be the right strategy for the games going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the common theme that's coming out in nearly all the conversations I'm having is listen. You know, one mouth, two ears. That seems to be the common thread, which can be time and time again from seasoned practitioners such as yourself. So I can see you're obviously incredibly enthusiastic about what it is that you do, but there must be parts of the job that you absolutely love, and there must be parts of the job that maybe you don't love as much.
Very much so. I thrive on the dynamic side of it. I thrive on being thrown a challenge, entering into something that I might not have done before, that I need to research and learn and understand and come up with a solution that works for people. I recognise the function and the role that I undertake is a support function for all the departments, for other businesses and so on. You know, so it's something the message I'm always getting out there is to say that health and safety doesn't stand on its own. It's integral to everything that everybody's doing, and I try to bring that together. But I like the challenge of somebody throwing something at me that is difficult, that I can get my teeth into, and that I can really feel like I'm adding value and providing something for people. And I think that goes right back again to my military background, and that's probably why I've ended up working in health and safety, because I'm operationally minded. I understand, you know, certainly when I go onto venues, I know how they work because of my background running leisure centres and acting as a lifeguard and so on, and that helps me today. But it's that dynamic approach from the military, really, that, you know, when I went out to the first Gulf War, you know, I was about 19, 20 years old. Never been in a situation like that before, but you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And my role there was I used to be on the ship, on the bridge, next to the captain of the ship, and I had a readiness state board in front of me of the ship. So if we came under attack and there was damage, I would be plotting on this board the status of the ship and reporting to the captain. You know, that's quite a nervy role that I held. But when I look back now, that kind of training and education has stood me in good stead for what I'm doing now. And I'm used to being thrown things that, you know, is a challenge, and working dynamically, and I love it.
Yeah.
I seem to work better under pressure and better when I'm really, really busy. You're going to ask me bits I don't like, and it's the bits when I'm really quiet. I like something to get my teeth into. If it's just routine stuff, daily stuff, clearly I understand it has to be done. But I can't say I really enjoy it. I don't get a great deal out of it. I like the harder stuff and things where I've really got to use my brain and work things out.
Well, you have plenty of opportunities to do that, judging by your CV. So just to end up then our conversation, Joe, I asked you to just think about top tips for aspiring practitioners or points that you wish you were told. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we mentioned the first one, isn't it? And that's listen. The second one really is don't fear anything that you're being asked to do. I think if you want a pathway to success, be bold and take the challenge and go for it. You know, that was a situation I was in with London 2012 with the Olympics. I'd never done anything like that before. I was petrified because I was thinking there's going to be so many good people around me. I'm going to absolutely have to be on top of my game. And I was nervous about, could I do this? And then when I started to deliver the work, I realised very quickly that I was actually contributing, and I was bringing, you know, ideas and process and solutions to the table, and it was getting recognised, and it gave me a lot of confidence. And I suddenly realised then, don't be afraid of this. You know, take things on, and those that take things on and work through that in the right way will get the success. But it's doing the work in the first place. And I think my other tip is, and it's from experience, is just get your head down. Focus on what you need to do in terms of the job and deliver the job to the best of your ability. Paul Dayton always said in London 2012, that was the time for us to do our best ever work. And I keep saying that each time I go into a games like Birmingham, that's the time to do my best work. It needs to be better than what I did in London.
No, thanks for that, Joe. I think you be bold. I think that's great advice in itself, actually. And, you know, listen, then you won't go far wrong. But throw yourself into it as well seems to be what you've done throughout your career. Know your own levels of competency, improve your own levels of competency, but get involved seems to be what you've done. And you've looking down your CV, I don't know what I've been doing for the last 14 years, to be honest. So looking at your CV, you've certainly got involved, and I think that's certainly what I'll take away from our conversation. So thanks ever so much for your time today. Once we get through all this COVID crisis, it'd be good to meet you in person one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for inviting me and having this conversation. It's been great.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.